Canon just released the user manual for the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, with lots of changes and refinements to the photo and video capabilities. Do we still have the photo FV mode? And what about 8K oversampled 4K? And what are the benefits of these new record modes? But before we get to the details, please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, helps this channel grow, and keeps you up to date on the latest camera coverage. From this page, it looks like Canon's redesigned the sensor curtain with more slats than the Mark I. The Mark I clearly has 4 visible slats. And while Canon does provide us with a full-size HDMI port, they're still providing us with the cable protector, but this time redesigned for the full-size HDMI port. And the term cable protector is really kind of misleading. It's not so much the cables that we're protecting, it's the camera. I use the cable protector all the time. It's in use right now. I'm a bit of a klutz, and every now and then I'll bump the camera into the side of a door frame or something else, or I'll just walk by and get too close to the camera. If that cable protector wasn't there, especially with a micro HDMI port, I likely would have bent that off and snapped it off inside the camera, or perhaps I could have even damaged the port itself. And especially with a full-size HDMI port, while it's a lot more snug, because it's a lot more snug, if you accidentally hit that, you're almost guaranteed to damage the port inside the camera. So I highly recommend using the cable protector when you're shooting, especially when you're shooting run and gun. But before I take you through some noticeable changes found in the manual for the R5 Mark II, please be aware that this manual may change before the final production model. And whenever Canon does release a firmware update, they also publish a newer version of the manual to cover off the changes. And I'm pleased to announce that the battery indicator gets a much useful update. With full bars, the battery is anywhere from 70 to 100% charged. However, as soon as it hits 2 bars, we know that the battery capacity is under 50%. And when we get that single flashing bar, that's when it drops below 10%. It's one of the first things I noticed in the manual that I thought, wow, that's going to be useful. I always carried around an extra battery when shooting with the R5 Mark I, but whenever it hit 2 bars, I really had no idea where it was. It could be as low as 35%, and it really didn't help me. And as soon as it got to that point, I usually switched out the battery, depending on where I was and what kind of scene I was shooting. But knowing that it's on 2 batteries, I'm going, well, okay, it's not flashing it. As soon as it gets to a single flashing bar, then I know I pretty well have to change the battery at the next scene or at the end of the next clip, and that's really useful information. And it also shows if there's no battery bars, then it's dead, which should be pretty obvious, I think. A few viewers reached out to me asking if the FV shutter mode was taken away from the R5 Mark II. Well, worry not. It's still there along with automatic, program, shutter priority, aperture priority, bulb manual, and 3 custom modes, and is separate from the video mode, so essentially giving you 6 custom modes. The photo file size type received a minor update. We have RAW and compressed RAW, but for HEIF and JPEG, we now have large, medium, S1 and S2, as well as each mode is now user customizable. But it's movie recording mode that has received a significant update in the Mark II. And of course, because we have that switch now, no more pressing the info button and the mode button to go between photo and video mode. But before we can record, we need to select the movie record size. This is where we select the resolution. And for each selection, the record time is shown in the top right. And Canon also now shows us how hot the memory cards are. That's right. Now, high-end memory cards like Angelbird will automatically shut down when they get too hot. So this really isn't any sort of indicator to let you know when your camera's about to overheat. It has different sensors and icons to represent that. When I was testing last year, when firmware 1.6 was dropped, I was recording for up to 2.5–3 hours at a time in 80-degree heat, or 27.5436 degrees Celsius. And one of the things I noticed is after doing the first test, I took the card out, it was so hot I dropped it. It was really hot to the touch, almost painful, and these CF Express Type B cards can actually get up to something like 65–70 degrees Celsius, and that's very, very hot. They're so hot, it's almost painful to the touch. So whenever you see that battery indicator or that heat indicator for the CF Express card really approaching into the high heat mark, be prepared then when you go to pull it out so you don't accidentally drop it, because if you're working on concrete or something, you drop it, you could actually damage the card. But the really big change to movie recording is how Canon's changed or relabeled the codecs to reflect industry standards and has added significantly more. You won't find All-I as an option anymore, but fear not, we have more options. Standard is the closest to All-I, and on the R5 Mark II, this gives you a bitrate of 450 megabits per second. High quality, as the name implies, offers better quality at a bitrate at 600 megabits per second at 29.97 frames per second, while light still encodes each frame at a reduced 300 megabits per second. And long GOP, which is the new name for IPB, encoding every third frame, has a bitrate of 150 megabits per second. And again, this is all 4K. With the R5 Mark I, there was only really one way to choose to record in 10-bit, and that means you had to choose one of the log profiles, Canon Log 1 or Canon Log 3. But the Mark II introduces a new record format menu, where we can choose H.264, represented by XF AVC-S, and H.265, represented by XF HEVC. And trust me, this is probably going to take you a little bit of getting used to. I don't think it's going to take too long because, well, the naming conventions are pretty clear. For example, if you're going to record in 10-bit 422, well, you see 422, and the difference between H.264 and H.265, H.265 is an HEVC codec, and of course it has HEVC in the title. But still, this is a very different menu setup than the Mark I, and it has an awful lot more options. And now we have the option of 4K SRAW, although the frame rates reach a little bit higher at 930 megabits per second for 29.97 frames per second, and 1860 for 59.95 frames per second. Canon's 4-channel sound recording is further explained, letting us know when the 4 channels are supported and how. And this will definitely require some testing. One thing I find interesting is it looks like if I have a shotgun mic hooked up to the R5 Mark II, I'll have 2 channels left and right stereo that I'll be recording, but it will also record the internal microphone in channels left and right as well. Now this might seem like it's a little bit, well, weird for some, but I can tell you there have been situations when I've been out in the field and either the batteries run dead in the microphone, or there's been some other hardware malfunction, or I didn't properly connect, or it came loose during shooting, and I lost all audio. So to have that internal microphone recording along with the shotgun mic or the other attached microphone that you have, if it's not recording all 4 channels itself, that's kind of a big deal. It's nice to at least have the backup, so at least I could transcode. Even if there's a lot of wind, I can at least hear what's being recorded, and then I can record that separately later and have it overlaid. I'm pretty happy with this update to the audio. Canon's log profiles are now set in the custom picture menu. Along with supporting Canon Log 2, Canon now allows us to alter the log curve, giving us more flexibility. Yeah, that's a bit of an aha moment. And when I first saw that, I thought, are they just explaining something? And no, they're not. They're giving us the option to change it to some degree. And this could prove very, very valuable. But until I actually have the camera in hand and test it along with many other capabilities, I'm going to be cautiously optimistic on this one. But this is definitely one of those Spock single eyebrow raising moments. But one of the first things, believe it or not, the first thing I checked in this manual, and I have kind of skimmed over the whole manual, was actually the specifications at the very end of the manual. We can clearly see every single recording mode for stills and video. How many photos we can take based on what type of mode we're shooting with, based on what type of card, the speed of the card, the capacity of the card, and how long we can record based on those new video modes that we get, again based on the type of card and the shooting conditions. The manual confirms that 8K oversample 4K does indeed top out at 29.97 frames per second. The mode is now called HQ Fine, differentiating from the original Mark I of 4K HQ, although they did use the term Fine in the recording mode. And it's represented by XF AVC-S YCC 422 10-bit. And the funny thing is, as I started going through these reference charts, I was pretty impressed. I saw the options I needed, but I saw so many more. That 4K SRAW format, that's something I really wanted to see in the Mark I. I only shot 8K RAW a couple of times, and the idea of shooting 8K RAW and then downsampling in post for video production, while it seemed like a good idea in theory, it never happened. I found that 8K oversample 4K was good enough, and with shooting Canon Log 3, I didn't clip the shadows or the highlights too often. But I really would have loved to have been able to shoot in RAW, and one of the things I'm going to do when I get this camera is test SRAW. The frame rates are a little bit higher, but I think in terms of shooting, it's going to give us many more options, although it doesn't appear that we get to shoot in that 8K oversample 4K mode, as you would suspect, because we're not getting the full sensor. So we're trading off some things. We might be trading off detail a little bit, but gaining in terms of protecting those highlights and shadows, having, well, the benefits of RAW. But again, if you want to ensure that you have the longest record times without the camera overheating, one of the very first things you're going to want to do is make sure that auto power off temp is set to high. The default is standard. And of course, you're going to want to have the LCD out when recording. The very simple reason is, right behind the LCD, right behind that plastic, if you were to cut it out, you would see a lot of those chips that produce an awful lot of heat. The image sensor, for example, the image processor. So by just keeping that LCD closed, what you're doing is like putting on a winter jacket. You're helping keeping it warm, and it'll increase the temperature by a few degrees. So you definitely want to have that out. Sorry about that, folks. The dog went barking like crazy, and it might not sound too loud to you, but it's really loud to me, and it completely knocked me off the puck. But going back to those settings, so you definitely want to have auto temp power off set to high, and I would just leave it there. Since firmware 1.6 came out, that's what I've done with the Mark 1. I've left it there, and I haven't had any overheating problems at all, shooting up to 80, 85 degrees. And I shot at 80 degrees for 2.5 hours without any issues. However, for those of you in really high heat environments that want a hybrid camera instead of getting the R5C, you might want to consider getting the active cooling grip. It's $499 and attaches to the bottom of the camera. It has 2 batteries, and it puts air through those internal cooling pipes. And for those of you that pre-ordered the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, and especially for those that ordered using my pre-order links in the description down below, thank you so much. One thing you might want to do, as I did early this morning, is I picked up the manual and started reading it. Now, it's a beautiful day today. It's going up to about 82 degrees without humidity, so I'm pretty well done reading the manual, and I've got 3 meetings right after this, so it's absolutely crazy. But later tonight, I'm going to pick up the manual and start reading through it, because one of the things I want to learn a bit more about is those action priority modes, the new autofocus modes. And the reason why that's not in this video, that's going to take a lot more studying, and I'm going to put out a separate video covering that, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. But a big thanks for you to staying and watching to the end. For those of you that pre-ordered the R5 Mark II, the battery grip, the battery, and that's one thing I found very interesting in the data. The number of people that ordered the battery, the new battery, is significant. It's almost for every person that ordered the camera, they picked up at least 1, if not 2 batteries of the new LPE6NP. Yeah, they really got to come up. You know, it'd be nice if they just named the batteries after people like Harry, Sally, Tiffany, Bob. That'd be kind of cool. I mean, I know Peter McKinnon thinks the P is named after him, and a few others think it's named after them, but it's sadly not. I don't know what it is named after. I think they just spun a wheel and that was the letter that came up. Anyhow, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for supporting this channel, especially those using my pre-order links. If you do use my pre-order links in the description down below, these guys right here, just be aware that I do get anywhere from 2 to 8% commission back. It doesn't cost you anything extra. You don't have to fill out any forms or anything else. It takes you directly to the page where you can pre-order it. And based on what I've seen already, the pre-orders are, well, this camera sold very, very well, and it's supposed to start shipping August the 20th. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching. Have yourself a great day, and we'll see you again soon.